If they've got an account, we want to log in. Let's create the login page. What am I doing? Create a blank page called login.php, and we will probably just grab, to save time, this layout we've already got of HTML. Chuck it in there and clean it up by deleting some stuff. You'll need some PHP obviously to process their login credentials from the HTML form. So we'll put some space up there. Enter login details below. Again, we've got a form. We're just going to clean this up so it relates to logging in. We'll say forgot password, then we'll redirect you to a page called forgot.php. We'll say click here, which we'll sort out at some point later. We don't need this account type selection. All we need is an input box for username and password, or email and password, sorry. So we'll just get to that point. Looks pretty good. Now let's check. See what it looks like so far. We'll go login, and that looks okay. Probably want to link there if they're a new user as well. So let's put that in a paragraph. Forgot password, blah, 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 and we'll put one there for new user, which will obviously redirect to register, and we'll say register here. Excellent. At the moment, obviously nothing's going to happen when I click login, because we haven't told it to. Once again, first thing we need to do is connect to the database if we're going to interact with it. In this case, our interaction with the database is checking what the user enters in the HTML form with what's in the database that exists in the database. So this should be a little less work than the registration page. Let's just copy some of this to make it easier, or faster rather. Paste it in, set your tabs up or your indents properly. Login. Don't forget to close off your if statement with the curly brace, because you don't want syntax errors that I have to fix for you. Again, if there's a session already, we want to stop it, okay? So when the page loads, we're going to unset any session variables, or essentially start a session and unset any variables just to clean the session if you like. Okay, so I'll just say start, and that means start or continue session. Remember, session variables or arrays are for remembering data that you store in it across the user's use of your web application, which is really handy when they're going between different pages. So start or continue the session, I guess we could say, and clean it. It's probably not the best terminology, but it's all right. Describes what it does. So the user clicks login. We need to check whether their credentials are right. But we're going to first clean the user input again so we can prevent SQL injection. So we need some stuff from the last page. And if you're unsure what I'm doing here, I'm just cleaning up the user input to prevent malicious code executing, if you like. By cleaning it. as we did when we registered. Just separate this a bit to get some clarity, clean up user input. I'm going to copy and paste that comment in. So you're reminded throughout these videos what's actually going on, because you need to know when you're explaining your code in annotations or what have you. Good so far, I imagine. All right, so if we're going to compare what the user's entered with what's in the database, then we need to actually get what's in the database. We've told the database, or we've told this page to connect to the database. We need some SQL here. So SQL underscore select, and our query is select everything from users table where the email matches what they've entered for email, and we'll limit the results to 1. Can't remember what that actually is for. I know it limits the records that are returned to 1, but I can't remember why off the top of my head. Perhaps someone can find out for me and let me know. And we'll set the results of that SQL query in a variable called result when it runs. So we'll run SQL connect against our connection. Select. And we'll then set a variable called row, and that's equal to MySQLi fetch array based on result. Let's just talk about what that actually does. So firstly, we write our query, obviously, then we execute it and place the results in an object. Place the SQL query results in object, and the object's called results. Then, to make it easier to process, as I've mentioned before, results from SQL queries and arrays and loops go hand in hand. So we'll put the results then in an array with the built-in function MySQLi fetch array. If they're in an array, it's a little easier to use. All right. Then we can simply create a variable called db password, which is equal to what's in our array at the position of password. And that refers obviously by the name, or what the name suggests is that that password here is the password in the database, which we need to get if we're going to compare it to what they enter. Okay? Excellent. So we're going to say if the passwords match, so if $password is equal to, so that's the password from the form, is equal to the DB password, the database password, then the login is successful, isn't it? However, that's not going to work unless we SHA-1 the password that they're entering, or hash the password that they're entering in the login form, because the one in the database, remember, is already hashed or SHA-1'd. Excuse my English. So if the passwords match, the usernames obviously match, or the emails obviously match, because this has returned results. So if there were if the email didn't exist when they tried to log in with it, this SQL query wouldn't return any results, which would mean we can't actually get any of this password to compare. So we don't actually need to say if the email in the database matches the email in the form, or we do, but we're doing it in this SQL query. So if the login is successful, we'll create some session variables, because they're handy to remember while the user is using our particular website or web application. We'll store session. We can define what these are too. So we'll store one called user ID, and this is the user ID from the database. And that equals the result from our database query above, and that is equal to user ID. Now that user ID there is obviously the column name in the database, or the field name I should say, user ID, which is why I've spelled it the same or with the same capitalization, and this one is one I'm creating, this session user ID, which means I can define it there. And I've used a lowercase u there so you can sort of hopefully see the difference. We'll also store one for the email, say email, and that's equal to row, quotes email, what's in the database under their email. And then we'll do one more for whether they're a staff member or not, because remember we want to differentiate the functionality based on their account type. Staff. Cool, good so far. So the login is successful. We want to redirect them probably to another page. Let's get that. Let's wait 2 seconds and then redirect, because it's makes it cooler. Redirect to, say, index, which is a page we might create upon successful login. If the passwords don't match, then we'll tell the user that. Or sorry, if the password's wrong. Else we'll echo incorrect with an asterisk, obviously, incorrect password. There. So that if matches that, else, and I've got another one to add here, which I neglected to mention. We also need to make sure that the user enters data in the login form. So we need to validate that they enter data in the login form. Let's do that. So we're going to say if not empty, or if exclamation mark empty email and password. So not empty password. I think that's it. No, because it hasn't been created yet. So these need to be from the request, not from the variable, which hasn't been created unless they're not empty. So just be careful there. I actually did that on purpose to make sure you're paying attention. So if they've entered valid data in the form, or they've entered data in the form, the login form, then we want to execute this code. So that means this if statement needs to have all this other code within it, which I'll do now by indenting. If you're using Sublime, it's Control and then the right curly brace button. We're missing a curly brace, which belongs to that if statement. Okay, so now we need an else to catch the scenario where they haven't entered data in the form, the login form, if they've clicked the button login. So this one is else. We'll echo something along the lines of please enter a valid, no, we'll just say please enter email and or password to catch both. Save a bit of time. If you like to, you can put some space there to make it easier to read. Put some comments in. So in this case, login credentials correct or match what's in the database. This case is obvious, the incorrect password. This case is obvious, they haven't entered an email and or password. Finally, as we did earlier, we close the connection to the database. Because it's good practice. Have a look into that for me, why it's important, and give me 3 reasons why. Let's check it works by saving and refreshing. So our username for, say, my account is tbryden at blah, blah, blah. Not 2. And then the password is tbryden, but remember it's hashed. And it successfully tries to redirect to index.php, which doesn't yet exist. So we need to go and create it. So that login page looks like it's working. Just to make sure. Let's try and log in without entering anything. So that means we haven't entered anything. Let's try and log in with a wrong password, such as that, and it says incorrect password. If they've forgotten, it tries to go to forgot.php, which is for resetting passwords, and if they're a new user, then it goes through register, and obviously, as you know, register works. So that is how you create a working login page in PHP.